you an update on this. If you didn't catch my first video on Gabby Petitio, I will go ahead and link that. I would start there if you are unfamiliar with the case. When I first started researching this case, Gabby Petito was a missing person. And then, like 10 minutes before I sat down to record the video, it was announced that a body had been discovered in Teton National Forest, so it hadn't been positively ID'd in my last video. So what happened, because it's really interesting how they found our body. Law enforcement knew that Brian and Gabby had been planning on going to Teton, and this is in Wyoming. But then a text was sent to Gabby's mother from her phone saying they were just heading into Yosemite. By the time that Gabby's disappearance, her disappearance just gripped the nation. But law enforcement had no idea where Gabby was. They were looking in Teton, but tips were flooding in. And one of these tips would come from Jen and Kyle Bethune, and they are YouTubers who travel the world living in a van with their children and dogs, which is kind of crazy because this is what Gabby and Brian were doing, trying to get a social media following for living this nomadic lifestyle. So it's crazy that a tip would come in, which would lead to the discovery of Gabby's body from a couple, on this same path, doing the same thing, this nomadic lifestyle. Anyway, this couple, who would be the ones who really kind of broke the case open, were doing the same thing, living the nomadic lifestyle, and they also happened to be at Teton when Brian and Gabby were there. Anyway, Beth and Kyle were of course documenting their travels in Teton, and while they were there, they drove past this white Sprinter van. It was pulled off to the side of the road and had Florida license plates. And Kyle and Beth are from Florida, so they were kind of excited, and they wanted to stop and say hello. But as they drove by the van, it was dark. It didn't seem like anyone was around, and so they figured that whoever was driving the van was out hiking or something like that. They did find it interesting when they drove back by the area later that night when it was dark. The van still seemed dark, like it was almost abandoned. But they didn't really think about it again until Gabby Petito went missing, and they realized they had been in Teton when Brian and Gabby had. So they began combing through their footage, praying and hoping that the van they had spotted was Gabby's, so they could alert the police to a possible location, because while law enforcement was searching, Teton is huge. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack, and I feel like the entire country was really invested in this case. Everyone wanted Gabby found. So Kyle and Jen immediately called the FBI, and authorities started searching the area. On September 19th, about 100 feet from where the van had been parked, police discovered Gabby's body. So this footage from these YouTubers she could have remained a missing person for forever. The footage not only showed Gabby's van, or what looked like her van, but the video revealed rust near the gas cap, which was consistent with Gabby and Brian's van, based on other photos of it, and it also appeared to show an abandoned sandal on the ground near the vehicle, similar to a shoe that Gabby had been seen wearing on the trip. A wide-brimmed hat was on the dashboard of the van in the video, which also seemed familiar to the hat that Gabby wore on her final Instagram post on August 25th. This posting didn't include location data with it, but neither did the other photos. Gabby's family and friends would later, thank this couple for coming forward with the footage. Gabby's parents went on the Dr. Phil show, and her father said, quote, "Her body was found. I guess it would be in front of a tent, if that's what was there, or just in front of the fire ring. There was definitely a fire ring there." And her mother, Nicole Schmidt, added, quote, "It wasn't far from the van. It was a 5-mile walk." The exact location of the remains was on the outskirts of Grand Teton National Park, in a very isolated area. It was in an area of dispersed campgrounds on the borderline of the Bridger Teton National Forest, about 40 feet away from where Grand Teton National Park actually begins. In order to get to that area, campers would have to cross over the creek bed that separated the campgrounds from the area where police found the van. And keep that creek bed in mind. We will come back to that. Gabby's stepfather Jim said, quote, "So you have to cross over this creek bed, this rock area, and go through these tributaries. And once you get on the other side, it's just some trees, sparsely placed throughout, and a lot of sagebrush, a lot of low brush," he said. It was in an area where there was a few trees and there was the remnants of a firing there. There was a clearing where I would assume, knowing I have a similar tent, where I would place my tent, and that opening would face out overlooking the mountain range. End quote. Gabby's stepfather Jim left a stone cross and flowers in the exact location she was found. CNN would later report that Teton County Coroner Dr. Brent Blue ruled Gabby's cause of death to be strangulation, and the manner was homicide. He said that at the time of Petito's death was estimated to be 3 to 4 weeks before her body was found. Florida Medical Examiner, where they were positively identified as belonging to Brian Laundrie. Like I said, the medical examiner stated that Brian's cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. The park where the remains were discovered connects to the Carlton Reserve, which is where they had suspected he was. The items and the body were found in an area that had recently been underwater. This discovery left everyone heartbroken. Now there were 2 young people dead, and there were still no answers as to what happened to Gabby. Interestingly, the people who found Brian's remains were his own parents, who had been searching for him in the area. Apparently, they had told the FBI and police they were planning on going in to look for him. I don't know. I feel like his parents know so much more than they ever, I feel like they were covering for him, and I find it almost too suspicious that they were the ones to find Brian. But anyway, it was reported that there were some, quote, articles found near the remains. Officials said that Brian's skeleton was all that was left of his body due to extensive carnivore activity, such as scavenging from coyotes, rodents, and raccoons. There was a 47-page report which also detailed items recovered from the scene where his remains were found, including a backpack with a tent and flares, a piece of paper, a red hat with the logo Moab Coffee Roasters, and a wooden box that contained a small notebook and photos. It's interesting that a hat with the Moab Coffee Roasters logo was found because, if you'll remember, Moab, Utah was where Brian and Gabby had that run-in with police, and that's all on the first video footage from that and everything. Anyway, in the notebook found with his remains, Brian had wrote down what happened to Gabby, or what he said happened to Gabby. So let's talk about what he had written in that notebook. Brian wrote, quote, "Gabby, I wish I was right at your side. I wish I could be talking to you right now. I'd be going through every memory we made, getting even more excited for the future. But we lost our future. I can't live without you. I've lost every day we could have spent together, every holiday. I'll never get to play with," and then there was some illegible things again. "Never go hiking with TJ. I loved you more than anything. I can't bear to look at our photos, to recall great times, because it is why I cannot go on. When I close my eyes, I will think of laughing on the roof of your van, falling asleep to the sight of," and again, it's illegible writing right there, "at the Crystal Geyser. I will always love you. If you are reading Gab's journal, looking at photos from our life together, flipping through old cards, you wouldn't want to live a day without her. Knowing that every day you'll wake up without her, you wouldn't want to wake up. I'm sorry to everyone this will affect. Gabby was the love of my life, but I know, and I know, adored by many. I'm so very sorry to her family because I love them. I'd consider her younger siblings my best friends. I'm sorry to my family. This is a shock to them as well, a terrible grief. They loved as much, if not more than me. A new daughter to my mother, an aunt to my nephews. Please Please do not make this harder for them. This occurred as an unexpected tragedy. Rushing back to our car, trying to cross the streams of illegible. Before it got too dark to see, too cold, I hear a splash and I scream. I could barely see. I hear a splash and a scream. I could barely see. I couldn't find her for a moment. Shouted her name. I found her breathing heavily, gasping. She was freezing cold. It had been blazing hot in the national parks in Utah. The temperature had dropped to freezing, and she was soaking wet. I carried her as far as I could from the stream toward the car, stumbling, exhausted, in shock, when my illegible, and I knew I couldn't safely carry her. I started a fire and I spooned her as close to the heat. She was so thin, had already been freezing too long. I couldn't, at the time, realize I should have started a fire first. But I wanted her out of the cold, back to the car. From where I started the fire, I had no idea how far the car might be. I only knew it was across the creek. When I pulled Gabby out of the water, she couldn't tell me what hurt. She had a small bump on her forehead that eventually got larger. Her feet hurt, her wrist hurt, but she was freezing, shaking violently. While carrying her, she continually made sounds of pain. Lying next to her, she said little, between violent shakes, gasping in pain, begging for an end to her pain. She would fall asleep, and I would shake her awake, fearing she shouldn't close her eyes if she had a concussion. She would wake in pain, start her whole painful cycle again, and then there's some, illegible writing, and then it says, furious that I was the one waking her up. She wouldn't let me try to cross the creek. Thought, like me, that the fire would go out in her sleep and she'd freeze. I don't know the extent of Gabby's injuries, only that she was in extreme pain. I ended her life. I thought it was merciful that that was what she wanted, but I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock. But from the moment I decided, took away her pain, I knew I couldn't go on without her. I rushed home to spend any time I had left with my family. I wanted to drive north and let James or TJ kill me, but I wouldn't want them to spend time in jail over my mistake, even though I'm sure they would have liked to. I am ending my life not because of fear of punishment, but rather because I can't stand to live another day without her. I've lost our whole future together, every moment we could have shared. I'm sorry for everyone's loss. Please do not make life harder for my family. They lost a son and a daughter. The most wonderful girl in the world. Gabby, I'm sorry. I have killed myself by this creek in hopes that the animals tear me apart, that it may make some of your family happy. Please pick up all of my things. Gabby hated people who litter. End quote. And that is all we have. It's interesting how he says he carried her as far as he could, but then he says how thin she was later. She was so skinny. And we know that where her body was found was 5 minutes from their van. Tell me what you guys think. I don't believe this at all. I don't believe any of this. I think he left this note, and he didn't want his family to be affected by what he did. So he tried to make it seem like something it wasn't, and I'm sure he didn't want to be remembered that way, but I think it's all complete garbage. I just quickly want to cite my sources for this video. I got information from a New York Salo titled Gabby Petitio case. Tips that may have led to the discovery of the body from September 20th, 2021. A Daily Mail article titled Gabby Petitio's body was discovered in an isolated area, which had evidence of campsite just 5-minute walk from where cops found the van. Written by Natasha Anderson. A CNN article titled Gabby Petitio's cause of death was strangulation, says coroner, by Meg Wagner, Melissa McKaya. And an article from the New York Times titled Human Remains Found in Florida Park, where Laundrie, FBI says, by Michael Levinson and Isabella Grulon. Pause. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I love you. I will be back Monday for Mystery Monday. Bye. Anyway, let me know what you guys think, and I will be back on Monday for Mystery Monday. Love you guys.